Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is the product of the quarantine has definitely been my beard.
It's
The thing is, like, the thing about growing a beard though around Chris is that no matter what you do, if you're on the same screen or standing beside him or whatever, your beard will just never be as good as Chris's.
oh,
It's an unfortunate thing. I'll never be able to win. I'll never be able to win the beard card. That's a. I'll never have the beard award with Chris around until
yeah,
you.
something you'll have to get used to.
Yeah, yeah. It's a
Going
step.
on, Andreas.
Yeah. All right, so Chris, you're in. You're locked in. You're good.
Good to go.
Perfect.
Let's
Okay.
let's rock this. That's one down. One rock pun down.
How many rock puns can we add into the next 45 minutes?
Let's see what we can do.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Rock Talk. Thank you all for joining us. Today I'm here with Chris Kelly. Chris, how you doing, bud? Thanks for coming on and do this with me.
Yeah, of course, buddy. No problem.
Yeah. So today we're going to talk about athletic therapy. We're going to talk about trying to minimize the risk of injury during this time. We're going to talk about how to safely return to sport once this thing is over. It will eventually end. And then some of our ideas and thoughts around coaching and stuff like that. And as we go along, if anyone's tuning in, please feel free to send any questions as we go along. Feel free to send them whenever you can. We'll try our best to catch them as we go along, but if we miss a question, please feel free to just repost it in the chat, and then Chris and I will try and get back to it. But Chris, this is the longest that you and I haven't seen each other since you started at UTM. So
This is very true.
it is
very true. It's been good. I mean, sorry.
So I was about to ask how you're holding up, but I guess you're relieved. But what have you been up to this for the last little while?
Just like everybody, just trying to keep happy. Yeah, just working out at home. A lot of cooking. It's nice kind of having an extra hour or two after work to kind of plan out and cook stuff. And yeah, just trying to keep busy. I've got a puzzle on the go. Very exciting, I know.
Puzzle on the go?
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, cool. Yeah. What's one of the one things that you've cooked recently? What's one of your go-to lockdown recipes?
I don't know about go-tos. Yesterday I did like a shrimp ceviche style thing with like avocado, a lot of lime juice, corn, just trying stuff out. So it's fun.
I'm also trying stuff out, but by the sounds of it, I'm not succeeding as well as you are. I've pretty much got locked into my couple of standard things. I haven't tried anything new this week. That's not true. No, I did. I tried roasted Brussels sprouts for the very first time. I tried to make roasted Brussels sprouts. I did try and do that.
I made those a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
I burned them. 100% burned them. Absolutely. They said they said 30 minutes, and I was like, okay, fine, it's 30 minutes, and it was too much.
Yeah, it depends how you cut them, the size of them. Come on, Darren. Next we'll have cooking tips with Chris. We can do that another time.
Yeah, we should. Absolutely. I need them. Okay, so for those of us who don't know, give us a little bit about your role at UTM and some of your kind of educational background and stuff like that.
Yeah, so at UTM, I'm the rehabilitation and fitness specialist. By trade, I'm a certified athletic therapist. To become that, I went to York for my kinesiology degree. Then during that time, concurrently, I did the athletic therapy certificate program. There's, I think, 8 other schools now for AT in the country, 8 or 9. I should have checked that number before coming on, but there's 2 in Ontario, York and Sheridan. So a lot of the students that we have do go to Sheridan. One of them last year was from York, but I went through the York program, and then a few years of bouncing around and saw the posting at UTM, nice and close, and applied, and here I am.
Here you are, absolutely. So
here I am at home.
So what is athletic therapy, and how is it kind of different from some of the other manual therapy disciplines that are out there?
Yeah, so like with a lot of the other disciplines, there's a lot of crossover. Our main focus is like we deal with musculoskeletal injuries, so sprains, strains, rehabbing after fractures, things like that. Probably the best way to describe it is what sets us apart. We focus a lot more on athletics and sport than these other professions. So say with physiotherapy, they do a lot of time learning things like stroke rehab, cardiac rehab, all these things. We don't learn any of that, but we spend that time that they learn that working with teams. So we also do a lot more field coverage. So it's not just the clinical side of rehabbing injuries. We're there at sporting events. You'll see us. It's usually the trainer that you think of. That's usually us. So taping of ankles, taping of everything before, support techniques. Then somebody gets injured on the field or ice, court, whatever. We're the ones who run out, treat them, whether we need to activate emergency things or just pull them aside or just say, hey, get back out there, you're okay. Obviously testing range and strength, make sure they're safe to participate, but that's one of our main focuses that really sets us apart. Things like with chiropractic, they'll do manipulations. We do mobilization, so it's a different kind of range of movement. They get more of that kind of more impactful thrust, whereas we just kind of go to the edge of the range and then try to push it slowly. So over time, we make that change. And then we do a lot more exercise based as well. So, and massage, a lot more manual, but that gives you a bit of an idea of our focus.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you here. I asked you this question already, and I got your text response, but I thought it'd be perfect to kind of have you on and ask this again. One of the recurring questions we've had a lot of is related to shin splints and just some of the other repetitive stress related injuries that are out there. And I think this is because one of the biggest challenges that we have training at home is that we don't have access to our low impact cardiorespiratory equipment. So we don't have access to our treadmills, our ellipticals, our recumbent bikes, like that type of thing. So we're kind of forced to do cardio somehow. So a lot of us are having to walk on the sidewalk or run on the like sidewalks, roads, that kind of thing. And a lot of us aren't probably used to running that much on that kind of like hard surface. So do you have any thoughts on how we can kind of minimize the risk of injury while kind of making that transition, and any ideas on like guidelines to follow and things like that?
Yeah, so in terms of kind of shin splints specifically, one of the major things is strengthening kind of the muscles of the lower leg. So things like calf raises, which are very simple. If you have bands, different ankle movements, eversion, inversion, so that's just moving the ankle out or in, mostly out, and then pulling your toes and foot up towards your body, strengthening the tib ant, so the muscles at the front of the leg. That goes a long way. A lot of people don't think about it, but strengthening the small muscles of the foot, so things like scrunching a towel or picking up marbles, even just activating the arch to just kind of pick it up a bit and then relaxing it, things like that can help strengthen the foot. Everything's going through the foot, right? All the impact is going up and then going up the body. So having a weak foot, some people are just naturally with kind of collapsed arches. That's not always an issue, but to strengthen the muscles is usually quite beneficial. Balance work, so balancing on one leg, eyes open is easiest, eyes closed, and kind of progressing through different challenges. So that's one component, making sure the body's kind of prepared in terms of that. The other thing is just kind of gradually getting used to it. Instead of going out and maybe running for 5-10 minutes on a treadmill at a time, going out for 20-kilometer run on a hard road, you might actually feel okay the first time. The next day you'll be sore, but no injury. But if you keep kind of doing that really dramatic increase, over time you're putting yourself at a higher risk of injury. And that doesn't just apply for shin splints, that's any injury. Anytime you're dramatically increasing your activity or workload, then you're at a higher risk of injury. So the thing that we try to get athletes to do is maintain that consistency. So if an athlete's off during this time and they're not doing anything at home, they're going to have a hard time coming back, especially if there's other athletes that they play with who have been training, and they're just going to be at different levels, but a coach might expect everybody to be here, so this person's at a higher risk of injury. Right? So gradual increases when possible. So people that are trying to get ready for sport in September or October, November, if you're not doing anything right now, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. You won't be as fit, but you also can't get there as quickly. So in terms of injury prevention and getting back into it, kind of the balance is trying to maximize performance while minimizing risk of injury. So if you're higher level of activity regularly, then you're at a lower risk of injury when you do up your activity level. But if you're doing nothing and you increase it, you're at a higher risk. Does that make sense? It's kind of almost a curve.
Yeah, totally. I think of it as like the cliff up and the cliff down. You never want to run off the cliff and do absolutely nothing after working out at a particular level. And you never want to drastically increase your workload and then you just kind of like run into the wall. You want to try and kind of ramp it up and then ramp it down. What would you do if you started to kind of feel some of the symptoms of like shin splints or like something like that? What would be kind of some of the steps that you would take if you kind of start to feel like you get some of those symptoms that you normally associate with?
Yeah, so just speaking generally, because there are a couple different types of shin splints, you can kind of feel them at the front of the leg or more kind of on the inside of the tibia. Things like stretching, the strengthening exercises I said, again, don't just do a ton of them, kind of just slowly increase that as well so that your muscles get used to that workload. Bit of rest. Once shin splints get to a certain point, the only way they're really going to get fully better is rest. So you don't want to get yourself into that point by working too hard, too fast. You want to do it intelligently, and as soon as you start feeling it, back off a little bit. And this isn't your normal kind of post-workout soreness the day or two after. Yeah. This is the aching through the night, that kind of pain. Because eventually, if you just kind of keep pushing through it, that old school mentality of no pain, no gain, shin splints quite often lead to stress fractures, and then you're off for 6 weeks or so, or in a boot, and then you're starting from scratch all over. So you want to avoid that. Like, if that happens, you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Boom. Number 2. Sorry, everybody.
Was that off the cuff? That was off the cuff, wasn't it? That was good.
I'm not going to lie. I looked at a few, but I didn't know when I was going to use them. So.
That's amazing. Okay, good. I almost lost my train of thought. See? All right. So obviously, neither of us have any kind of magic ball. We don't know when things are going to return back to normal or what normal is going to look like or anything like that. But one of the things we do definitely know is that, you kind of mentioned this before, it's the idea that the longer that you're inactive, like the longer that you are inactive for, the greater the risk of injury when you finally do participate in sport, right? Yeah. So a really important conversation that I think is really important to have is what are the steps we have to take to try and make sure that we're actually ready to compete when we finally get back into it. What are some of your thoughts on how we can prepare for playing again? Do you have any ideas of what some of those important steps might be?
So again, just that gradual increase of activity. So like I said, if you're doing nothing now, you're kind of behind the 8 ball on that. So you have to, again, slowly increase. Obviously, a lot of people are limited in terms of equipment. Bodyweight exercise, as you and I both know, if you're going to a certain level of exercise and you're hitting that fatigue level, you're still going to get benefit of it. Mm-hmm. Is doing bodyweight squats, holding a bag of rice going to be the same as loading up a bar really heavy? No, but it'll help maintain that muscle and that strength. You're still going to keep the muscle mass. Mm-hmm. It's just your strength will go down a bit, but as soon as we get back, it'll be less difficult of a comeback to that. So you want to keep the ball rolling with your progress. We've got to switch ways we're doing it in these times, but there's still definitely progress to be made. This is actually a great time to kind of help any mobility issues, any lingering injuries. This is a great time to take advantage. It's almost like a forced rest, but we don't want to be fully rest. It's that active recovery is what we like to say. So you're not doing nothing to let something recover. And actually exercise is the best thing, according to research, to help injuries. Obviously that has to be kind of guided along the kind of severity of their injury where you're at, but that progressive overload essentially, right? So you keep working your way up over time, give yourself a couple of weeks of doing something. Lifters, you're generally in what, 4 to 6 week programs at least of
Mhm.
phases. You think about these things in the same way with injuries. Our progressions when you're starting off might be a bit quicker, but as it goes up, it'll start to plateau a bit. But it's always you're working and working a bit. Then you have even the deload weeks that people think of, or say cross country runners before a big race. They've been training hard, or marathon runners. They do a bit of that deload, that taper before they hit it, just so that the nervous system can recover. When you're not doing as heavy weights, the nervous system actually doesn't get challenged as much, but
Mhm.
you can still work at it, and improve. So just that consistency of working hard, make sure you're hitting all the same muscle groups, which can be a challenge. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of great things out there online. There's some things that are a little iffy as well.
The wild
So
west of YouTube. Yes, absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So uh,
So
yeah.
then what about those that, so you mentioned that kind of like that 4 to 6 week period. Like, let's say we actually have a date, we know when competition is going to start back up again. What do you think that 4 to 6 week period of time would look like before competition starts? What are some of the things we want to make sure we do within that kind of like 4 to 6 week window?
So obviously it depends on the actual kind of the needs of your sport, right? So
Mhm.
runners will start want to kind of ramping up a bit, and obviously talking to your coach is a huge thing. What are they expecting you to be at? Like, what do they see if they're running a training camp? What are their expectations for your fitness level at that point versus even just recreationally? You always hear about the
Mhm.
armchair quarterbacks going in and getting hurt. Uh,
Yep.
so you want to at least be active, even if you're just playing recreational sport, just for health benefits as well. But in terms of competitive sport, yeah, know your needs for your sport and then slowly work up. So a lot of sports traditionally follow like the 10% rule. It's not the
Mhm.
best rule, but it's a bit of a guideline. They find that if you're doing nothing, 10% is a lot different than an increase if you're really experienced.
Right.
There's a few other ways of doing it. Listen to your body. So you want to be pushing yourself to kind of gain whether you need explosiveness or power, fitness, whatever it is. You want to push yourself. But if you're feeling exhausted all the time, you really have to kind of cut back a bit. It's such a vague question to answer because
Yeah.
the challenge is your sport, but also the rest of your life. People have different stressors.
Yep.
You and I don't have kids. That's a whole thing we don't have to worry about, right? Of different athletes that are coming back to sport. Sleep is the big one. If you're not sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night, right, it's your recovery isn't going to be good. Nutrition. So people that do all those right things lead low stress lives, great nutrition, sleep well. They're going to bounce back and be able to withhold a fair bit more of a workload.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something I kind of talked about before. It's we all have a certain amount of like residual training effect that will come from whatever training we've done previously. And we also all kind of have like a maximum amount of training that we're kind of able to withstand at any given time. And that amount of training we're able to do is always contingent on how we're able to actually adapt to that stressor. So if we're not sleeping well, we're not eating well, then our ability to be able to adapt to whatever stress we're putting on the body will decrease. And so we're not able to handle as much of a workload. One of the kind of like general ideas around like time off and then how much you have to kind of prepare for that I heard from a colleague of mine was the idea that for every week you miss, you basically have to make that up with like 2 workouts. So if you've been off for 3 weeks, then that basically is like 6 workouts to kind of slowly bring yourself back up to that level that you were before you stopped.
Yeah.
As like just a little bit of a kind of like just a general guideline. And again, that's going to be so different for every single person. And that will be, everyone's going to have to do exactly what you said, like listen to your body, really be aware of what your individual circumstances are and be thoughtful about how you kind of put together your plan for that 4 to 6 week period before we kind of get back. But yeah, absolutely. Is this similar to what like a return to play protocol would look like after an injury? Is there like some kind of parallels there, and what would be kind of different about that?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities, right? Anytime that you can't do the same level of activity that you were previously, and you're kind of reduced in that, there is going to be a bit of time coming back. So, say somebody sprains an ankle, the thing that we're going to do, we're going to be giving direct exercises to that, manual therapy. We're going to be helping recover the actual site. But at the same time, we're keeping the rest of their body as close to that level of performance as previous as possible, right? If somebody has that rolled ankle, they're still going to be doing upper body workouts, and they're still going to be doing their cardiovascular work. We just have to modify what that is. So if it's too tender, too difficult to run, and we're worried about that extending their injury, they're going to be on a bike. Or with different injuries, swimming is a great one, or even pool running, right? There's millions of different ways, rowing, whatever it is for the cardiovascular system. And especially as cross-country runners near the end of the season and their kilometers are really ramping up, sometimes they get a little bit, and it's a couple days a week where, like, we want to keep them competing because they're not at a stage where they're too sore or in too much danger of making things worse, but we want to reduce impact, per se. So we might have them on the bike or even the elliptical, whatever feels best for them. I'm not usually the hugest proponent of the elliptical for athletes just because it's a different running mechanic. But if it cuts down on the impacts and it's the closest thing we can get, then that's perfectly fine. Even if it's one of those curved treadmills that we have in the rock, those can cut down on impact for a lot of people. Yet I've had runners who really dislike them. So you kind of have to personalize it a bit for what feels best to that athlete. But yeah, so as we're kind of getting that functionality back of the injured site, everything else increases as well. And that we want to get a sport specific as soon as possible while doing it safely. So whether that's when a practice is going on, the athlete might not be able to do, say, the defensive slides in basketball where they're going from one side pushing off that leg, but they can work on their handling skills or something else that is appropriate. If there's another coach, they might be fine going up on their toes and just working on some shots. So there's always skills to be worked on and other things. But they also have to put the time in on that ankle or that leg to kind of strengthen up everything there while we treat the injury site.
Yeah, I think it was like the 3 good limbs principle. So if you have an ankle that's a bit sore, like, you got 3 other limbs that you can use. So we have to try and make the best use of whatever time you have to make sure that we keep those as strong and as we can and keep your aerobic fitness as high as possible. One thought I had just as you were talking about being prepared is we talked a lot about like physical preparedness. And I think it's also just as important to be mentally prepared to be able to kind of get back into competition as much as possible. So if someone's off playing a sport for, that kind of like, or anything over that 4-week period, they're going to kind of start to feel a little bit strange when they start to compete again. So I was wondering your thought, if you think it'd be helpful to kind of add in some of those like visualization techniques in that 4 to 6 week period of time, watching film of yourself, really trying to find a way to try and you're never going to recreate what it's like to compete. You're never going to be able to kind of like recreate that setting, but you might be able to try and minimize a little bit of the rust getting back into sport by doing some of those like visualization techniques, watching film of yourself, just trying to find a way to try and get your mind as prepared as possible to kind of step on the court or the trail or whatever it might be. That was
for sure. The mental aspect is huge, and I think your old professor or that you brought in to talk to your weightlifting team, and I like the way he put it. He asked your athletes how much, because everybody has this saying like, 90%, 80%, 70% of sport is mental. And then the question he asked to them was, how much time do you spend working on your mental skills in sport? And everybody was like, I don't, right? Some people visualize a bit, but if you think about sport as that 90% mental and you're not spending any time, yet you're spending maybe 6 to 10 hours a week practicing, plus another 5 in the gym, whatever it is, that ratio is off from what you said the game was. So visualization is key. My biggest pet peeve when I'm a coach is people who get injured and disappear. Yeah. They should still be at the games, still be at practices, because things change, right? You can still learn, right? There might be new plays or whatever it is. It's not so much that you need to know that play, but it might be something you haven't seen before, so your understanding of the game or sport grows there. But yes, that visualization techniques of kind of seeing and kind of focusing, and some talks I've been to, they really go into using all the senses. So like say you're a soccer player and you've been off, think about and visualize and kind of really try to feel what the soccer ball would feel like when you're kicking it. Think about the smell of the field and the grass, and try to use all your senses and the sounds that you hear. So that actually really, and research shows that it does help performance when you return.
Exactly, because it triggers your mental preparation to know that you're about to go and compete. If every single time you walk onto a soccer field, you smell the fresh cut grass, you see specific cues, and then your body will start to prepare itself mentally and physically. You'll have like some physiological change in preparation for the fact that you're about to play or practice or whatever it is, right? That's a good segue too. You just mentioned coaching. So in addition to being an athletic therapist, you are also an accomplished rugby athlete and coach. What drew you into the sport of rugby? And how did you get into coaching?
So what got me into rugby was Scottish background, hence the ginger beard I've got. I know like my dad played it growing up a bit. My brother, he's a couple years older than me. He got into it in high school. Went and watched a couple games, and it looked really interesting. I grew up playing a lot of hockey and some contact sports, so I was like, sweet, I love contact, so might as well get into it. So I started fairly young for back then in Canada. I was about 12 or 13 years old. So just got into it and fell in love with it, and it eventually became my main sport. And so I trained for that for years, and then coaching came about. I've actually always been interested in coaching, so even when I was still playing, when I was an under-16 athlete, I just wanted to help around my rugby club and my high school, so I'd coach the younger age grade. Mm-hmm. So when I was under 16, I coached under 14, and when I went to under 18, I coached U16, and then when I went to university, I took a few years off, kind of focusing on getting my degree. Had to rehab a few injuries along the way, so I was focusing on that. And then towards the end of my playing career, I had a few concussions that started kind of throw me off a little bit and was affecting my ability to do my job. So made the decision, okay, I should probably stop doing this. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hurting my mental and physical well-being. So I was talking to my coach and telling him that, hey, I'm going to have to kind of step away from the sport. I'll still come out and watch. And he basically said, okay, you're the new assistant coach. He's an old family friend, so he kind of talked to me pretty bluntly like that, but I was quite open to it. So I was his assistant coach for a couple of years, and then took over the program and kind of, went for there and coached that club for a few years and really, really enjoyed it. So kind of hope to keep coaching and going that way.
You played on some pretty high-level teams. What are some of the different teams you played on?
Played a lot of provincial level, played a few kind of teams junior growing up, a lot of regional, so like the Niagara region is where I'm kind of from. Mm-hmm. So played that growing up, and I got a bit for the Ontario senior men, and then I ended up being their therapist for years, which was a funny transition, but it was nice. So I got to work with a lot of my former teammates and a lot of coaches that coached me as a kid growing up. They were the coaches I was working with, so it was really fun.
And then what about some of the teams you've coached since then?
Mostly focusing around Burlington, so that's a club. That's the place I grew up. I started playing there when I was 12, 13, and then to get there and end up coaching their senior men's program. So it's 3 teams. So I was in charge of that program, and it was a lot of fun. We had a good amount of success. We went from kind of a regional league, and now we're in the top league in Ontario. So it's the highest level in Canada with the exception of provincial right now. So each provincial one has their own, but in Ontario, that's the highest league, and it's been a fun ride, and that's something awesome. I really enjoy. Yeah.
What are some of the challenges of coaching adults versus kids, and do you kind of have to approach that a little bit differently?
Yes and no. Different athletes are different, right? Some of them, they have different needs. Mm-hmm. Kids, I find you have to be a little bit more kind of game oriented, right? Going that play a game, maybe integrate a skill and kind of show them something, then play a game again and see if that works back into it. And hopefully, so if they start doing it right, give them that positive reinforcement. Mm-hmm. Adults, you do still do that, it's a little less. It's more about fun, right? A little less time on the skill development at certain ages. Really young, they won't have any interest in it. I learned pretty early. I was running a kind of skill sessions for the whole rugby club because the weather was bad, and our season ended early. So I left it open, but I kind of suggested, hey, this might not be for under 14, under 12 minis, but open up. So a couple kids came out, and they 5-10 minutes in of working on passing skills, they were like, "Can we play a game?" I was like, "Yeah, not today, sorry." But so you definitely have to gear it towards your audience and that.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a family friend who runs a hockey school, and you watch them play, and for whatever reason, like at that level, they should be able to pass really well. But I was like, why don't you do more passing drills? Like they can't put like 3 or 4 passes together. And he basically was like, if I ran a hockey school and said, today we're going to do passing, he's like, nobody would show up. So it's just funny. Like it's even like kind of when we were younger, we would work on the fundamental skills kind of like all the time in a more kind of like fun setting. And I find it's tough now to kind of like to work on the fundamental skills a bit more.
Yeah, and the shift has kind of happened where, and I think it's starting to shift back where a lot of people started focusing like, oh, my kid wants to make the NHL. He's going to do hockey from the age of 5 all the way through. And there's people on the ice earlier. So working with younger kids, it's not so much always about the technical skills. It's more about kind of developing that physical literacy, that ability to move, right? So that's why they're playing a variety of sports. And you listen to a lot of the great athletes that we've had, like Wayne Gretzky playing lacrosse in the summer, then switching, and a lot of hockey players did that, right? So.
Oh, we have a question.
We have a question.
Right, amazing, perfect. Thank you, Anthony. That's good. So the question is, any preference to age for coaching? Chris, any and then what style as well?
So I like coaching older athletes. It's the same kind of age grade that I like working with as a therapist. Like I like teenagers and up. I'm just not used to being around kids, to be perfectly honest. It's just not generally in my wheelhouse. So like that's one thing I say at a rugby club. I'll have a lot of the minis coaches asking me questions, and I'm like, you guys probably know more about this than I do. Like I wouldn't know how to run a practice that well for, say, a group of 8-year-olds, right? I don't know their needs and that very well. But I like that kind of older age group, men, women, whatever it is, those athletes that are usually about 16 plus is what I like working with. In terms of style, the thing I found was when I tried to be kind of a very forceful, kind of loud coach, it's just not me, it's not my personality. So I found when you try to be something that isn't yourself, athletes see right through it in a second and they won't listen to you. So I'm that calm, kind of relaxed coach, and that's just my personality, easygoing. Where I work with another coach who is a little more higher strung, a little less politically correct at times, great technical knowledge, but we do seem to kind of work well, a bit of that yin and yang kind of feeling. So, like, as long as you're kind of true to yourself, respectful of your athletes, encouraging, so I think you can find a way. There's no one style of coach that's right for every athlete either.
Totally, absolutely. And it's funny because as someone who coaches like teams as a strength and conditioning coach, and then coaches individual athletes in the sport of Olympic lifting, it's very interesting the difference between the individual relationship you have to have with someone who you are coaching on an individual level and the relationship you have to have with the team when you coach them all as one group. Because it's tough. It's a really difficult thing to try and like find that balance of having an individual relationship with that athlete while still having all the same things of like making sure that you treat everybody the same, making sure that all the standards are the same for all the different athletes. Like those types of things become very, very challenging. And then ultimately in Olympic lifting, you're always wanting to try and help all of your athletes excel, right? But there has to be a little bit extra attention on those who are competing at that higher levels because there's so much more thought and time that kind of has to go into their programming and preparing them for those higher and higher and higher level competitions. We have an Olympic team. How do we sign up? Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be me. What you would do is you'd just email me at darren.turner@utron.ca. If you just click on our website, you'll find my email in like a million different places. And we also, if you look at the UTM Athletics website, you'll also see the Olympic lifting page, and it has kind of all the information you need to kind of get started. It has some descriptions of the program and things like that. Yeah, that's awesome. Great question.
Yeah, actually getting back to your point of, like different athletes have different needs, right? Like I've found some athletes, they'll respond really harshly if you kind of get at them a bit more aggressively. Others, they just have to be around people, and if you kind of, it doesn't even have to be criticism, but they might get a little defensive. So some of them you might want to pull aside. Actually, a technique I use is quite often having other athletes like, hey, go pick this guy up, say they made a mistake. They may not want to hear it from me, but if their teammate comes up or a leader on the team, captains are a huge thing in team sport. Sometimes they're better to deliver a message than the coach, right? Athletes will listen to them a bit better at certain times. So kind of being aware of what your athlete's needs are, right? Because not everybody needs the same thing.
All right, so we have a question that says, if you had an injury, who do you recommend we see to treat the injury? I've found in the past that doctors can be hit or miss. What do you think? Who's the best person to get things treated?
Depends on the injury.
Yeah.
As an athletic therapist, if you're playing sports, I think that's a great way to go. You also have to keep in mind your benefits, right? If you have coverage for physio but not athletic therapy, that might be the better option for you. There's a lot of great physiotherapists that do a lot of work with athletes and sports, so that might be a great option for you. If your ankle range of motion's bad and massage around the area, the muscles that move it, if that's not good, a chiropractor might be needed for an adjustment, or an athletic therapist or physio can mobilize it. Some physios do manipulations as well. So it does depend on the injury. They can do assessing. If it's something that might need imaging, like x-ray, ultrasound, you can see a physician. You can even ask if they have a referral to sports med physicians if they deem it necessary, right? So they might have a bit better of a background with athletics, and they might know a few more things about what imaging you might need. And they tend to know a bit more about the needs for your return to sport. What level do you actually have to return to? Instead of some doctors, which is fine, they tend to think more about kind of back to your normal life, not always about the high performance aspect. That's a bit of a generalization. There's some great physicians out there that really handle these things well. But if you're finding that to be the case, then maybe try to get them to refer you to a sports medicine physician.
What do you think the kind of like the threshold would be? I mean, that's a bad way of framing the question, but like, when do you think you'd want to kind of start with going to see a physiotherapist, athletic therapist, chiropractor versus going straight to a physician? What do you think the kind of line is there that would kind of help you determine that?
So a lot of it's kind of the mechanism, like how the injury happened. So if there was a really strong force and then like you rolled your ankle really hard, felt a crack, and there's no therapist at your sport or whatever there to kind of take a look at it, and that pain's lasting through the night, that might be the case to go see a physician, maybe an emergency room to get any x-rays in case you need casted.
Right.
So it's hard to say the threshold without getting too technical. Right? For ankles, we use something called the Ottawa ankle rules, where it's about a weight bear, kind of touching a few spots to check for tenderness, feeling for actual kind of disfigurement of the appendage. But following that being said, if you're not in too bad a shape but you're sore, if you go see your athletic therapist, physiotherapist, chiropractor, massage therapist, they should be doing rule outs anyways, and they might say, hey, I think you should go see a physician. Chiropractors will generally do a lot of x-rays if they're worried about it in the slightest to make rule outs before they mobilize or manipulate. So they can help direct you in that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, amazing. We're getting close to 40. We're almost at 45 minutes. So is there anybody else out there who has any other questions? Or Chris, is there anything else that did you have any other thoughts that you wanted to touch on before we wrap up here?
I still think you should break out the guitars and come up with a Rock Talk theme song. They're on display right behind you. You got to break them out at some point.
The only reason why my guitars are behind me is because that is the only place in my apartment that has a corner where they go, and there's not direct sunlight. That's the only reason why, because the sun kind of comes at an angle this way, and that's why they end up in that corner over there. But I will not subject everybody to my guitar playing on our Instagram page. I promise. I promise I won't. I will spare everybody my guitar playing. Yeah, absolutely. Renata, do you have a question as well?
Oh, she said hello from Brazil.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Wow.
See, people are getting behind the guitar playing.
No.
Come on, man, you gotta rock and roll. That's three.
No, not happening. If anything, they're the only decoration I have in my entire apartment. So they will stay the decoration. I promise.
The minimalist lifestyle, right?
Utilitarian minimalism. That's what it is. Utilitarian minimalism. That's my fashion style.
Look at that UTM education coming into play right there with those words.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And this is funny. In all of my professional career, this is the first time I've ever really had an opportunity to use my theater degree. So yeah, there you go. All right, Chris, do you have any other quick thoughts before we wrap up here? Any other things? Anyone else have any other questions? Signed up for a rock talk.
Sorry, I was looking into some geology stuff before here, so didn't quite get to use it. Just my rock puns.
That's awesome. All right.
I think we've kind of hit rock bottom. Four.
Yes.
You miss sitting beside me, don't you?
Yeah. So for everybody who doesn't know, Chris and I share an office, and this is basically what happens when both of us don't have enough to do. This is where the conversation degrades to is rock puns. So it is.
But only on designated break times.
Pardon?
But only on designated break times.
Absolutely, only designated break times. 100%. Yes.
There we go.
For sure. Well, Chris, honestly, thank you so much. It is a great office. Yeah, absolutely. But Chris, thank you so much for coming in and doing this. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll be continuing this again. Please continue to check out the UTM Athletics Instagram page. We're putting tons of content out there every day, every week. And there's gonna be new stuff coming up, so stay tuned. And
every day I've got my Wellness Wednesdays, my mobility and stretching stuff. So check that out. I get to do my own promo. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Okay. And actually, I may end up in the group fitness schedule myself. Not next week, but the week after that. I might be doing I haven't entirely figured out exactly how I'm going to do this yet, but I'm thinking of doing a kind of like all the kind of slightly different ways to kind of modify bodyweight training in a way that's a little bit out there. And I'm going to have like a kind of like a particular topic every week. Once I've fully sussed this out, I'll be promoting it as well. But we'll see. I got some work to do there. Chris, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Hey, honestly, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in, and take care, everybody.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.